Hello everyone, tonight we are descending into the ruins behind the olive terraces, just where the earth no longer agrees with its own slope. You are here brushing dust from your knees as you lean toward a stone that hums when you touch it, not out loud but somewhere below the pulse of sound. You didn't bring enough rope and the person holding the map swears they left it just there. The tomb has no entrance and yet you're already inside it. You probably won't survive. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. It begins as most of these things do, with a doorway that was never meant to be opened. The slab wasn't carved with tools, at least none recognized in museum inventory. Instead, it seems to have been worn smooth by hundreds of years of pressing foreheads and whispered breath. The marks are shallow but deliberate. 7 of them. Not letters, not animals, not anything with a name. They curl like wind does when it changes its mind halfway through a canyon. And when you press your fingers into the first curve, the one furthest to the left, something shifts under your fingernails. Not stone. Something more like soft wood that dried too long in salt air. The tomb's location was long forgotten because it was never marked on purpose. The Romans built over it as Romans tend to do, and a vineyard grew on top. When the wine soured 3 years in a row, the locals blamed the sun, then the soil, and finally, of course, the workers. That was when they unearthed the edge of a wall that rang like ceramic when struck. They sealed it again naturally. That was in 1910. You're here now because your guide who insists on being called Corvulus found a sketch in an archive in Lyon. The drawing was labeled Sepulchrum Animalis Ignoti, the tomb of the unnamed beast. But Corvulus insists it's mistranslated. He says it should read tomb of the name that became beast. He laughs when he says that. But you've started noticing he never laughs when he's looking at the ground. Some researchers still argue whether the 7 spiral sigils found in certain Mediterranean ruins are connected. They show up in cave etchings, mostly with no signs of continuity. Not the same people, not even the same languages. One appeared in Sardinia, another in the Zagros Mountains, one under a bathhouse in Malta. All shaped like a swirl that leans too far inward, like it's trying to whisper to itself. No one agrees on what they mean, but they seem to appear just before a settlement vanishes entirely from the archaeological record. Not destroyed, not conquered, just gone. Inside the tomb, the air changes, not in temperature, but in grammar. Sentences don't finish the way you thought they would, and names you've said your whole life feel mispronounced when you think them here. It's not immediate. Just enough to make your thoughts unsteady, like walking on a rope made of braided hair. You pause at the threshold. Not from fear, not exactly, but from that very old instinct that says, wait. This place remembers a kind of silence older than your lungs. One of the floor stones clicks beneath your foot, not in warning, but in greeting. Something that had been leaning back for centuries has just leaned forward. You take another step. It's strange how tombs never smell like death. They smell more like libraries with too much dust in the binding or rain-soaked blankets that haven't remembered sunlight in decades. This one has a faint scent of copper and myrrh. You try to place it. It smells like a lie you almost believed once. Corvulus lights a lantern. The flame flickers sideways. Not from wind, but something slower. You both see it, but neither of you say anything. Because saying things gives them shape. The inner chamber has no walls, just folds of stone arranged like the inside of a closed fist. In the center, 7 obelisks lean against each other like rotted teeth in a crooked jaw. They are not inscribed. Instead, they are covered in shallow depressions like thumbprints. You touch one. It's warm, not metaphorically. It radiates the kind of heat you feel when someone stares at the back of your neck for too long. The warmth isn't coming from within the stone, but from a memory the stone seems to be having. Corvulus mutters something about the teeth of the forgotten. You don't ask him to explain. There's a moment brief like a blink while climbing stairs where you feel as though you're being counted. Not measured, not judged, just counted. 7 names etched into a tomb without any bones, none of them human, but all of them waiting to be spoken again. Behind you, the tomb door closes with a sound not unlike someone softly exhaling your own name. Only it's not your name exactly, just close enough to notice. Close. You tell yourself this is just geology and light tricks. You remind yourself that tombs are historical places. You also remind yourself that your watch has stopped ticking. The lantern flickers again, but this time the flame bends towards you, like it's listening. There's something about second chambers that always feel colder, even when the air hasn't changed. It isn't the temperature, it's the attention. The walls here are smoother than the outer room, as if wind passed through every night just to whisper its way around the curves. You run your fingers along the surface and realize they're not walls at all. They're backs, dozens of them pressed spine to spine in a circle as if once upright and now eternally kneeling. Each is slightly larger than a human body, but curved wrong. Too long in the lower vertebrae. No sign of pelvis, ribcage, or shoulder. Just endless arcs of vertebral stone, like the remnants of giants who curled up in apology. You ask Corvulus if this was part of the Roman design. He doesn't answer. He's on the floor, scribbling a charcoal impression of one of the sigils into his notebook. With such intensity, you wonder if he's writing it or remembering it. In the center of this spinal ring stands a basin, not carved, not placed. Grown. The mineral lines swirl upward like coral frozen mid-bloom. You peer inside expecting water or dust. Instead, you see yourself, only not quite. Your reflection stands still even as you tilt your head. It blinks when you do not. It holds its breath longer than you can, and somewhere behind its shoulder there is a figure you know for certain is not behind you. Yet, you step back. According to old Thracian records, what little survived the Roman sweep of the Balkans, there existed a tomb sealed not with stone, but with language. 7 utterances spoken at twilight, passed down orally and forbidden to be written. The last priest to seal the tomb was said to have bitten out his own tongue afterward. The ruins were lost during the Dacian Wars, but a single carving was recovered from a village well nearby, 7 concentric spirals, all pointing inward, ending in a single dot. Some call it a symbolic burial. Some call it nonsense. One folklorist from the 1800s suggested it was an elaborate metaphor for forgetting how to be human. Others think it was a vault, not for bones, but for a name so old it forgets how to stay asleep. Corvulus has started humming. A gentle tune, tuneless, really, but oddly rhythmic. You've heard it before. Not from him. From a recording on a cassette labeled "Don't Play This One When It Rains," found in a private archive near Delphi. The audio was never digitized, but somehow you know the notes. You all right? You ask him. He nods, still humming. His hands now trace the edges of the basin. You notice his fingertips leave behind a faint reddish trail like cinnamon dust or oxidized iron. His pupils are dilated, not in fear, more like awe or memory. You break the silence with a joke. Well, at least the acoustics are great down here. Could host a poetry slam. Tomb edition. No one laughs. But the spine walls seem to shift slightly inward. You try another. Think I saw this exact layout in an IKEA once. Only the furniture was more forgiving. Still nothing. Except the basin has now begun to ripple. No water, just light. As though a different sky is moving across its surface. Finally you whisper, "Did anyone bring snacks?" No. Then we really are doomed. Corvulus looks up. His eyes flick toward the basin. It's listening, he whispers. But it doesn't want food. It wants rehearsal. The 7th sigil begins to glow not visibly, but conceptually. You don't see light. You remember light as though someone just described it in a language you haven't heard since birth. The other 6 respond each in their own silence. like musical rests nodding in agreement. You notice now every sigil in the tomb is slightly different. Not variations, evolutions. As though each spiral is a phase of forgetting. Scholars once debated whether the spiral in prehistoric cave art represented the sun's path or a symbol of journey and death. But a smaller group argued for a third theory never published, only circulated among letters between field researchers in the 1930s. They believed the spirals were not symbols at all. They were instructions, not to go inward, but to come back out. Wrong. You look again at the basin. Your reflection is gone. Replaced now by a shimmer of heat above the stone, like the ghost of a name trying to form lips. Corvulus whispers one word. Not in Latin, not in Greek, not in any language you know, but it sounds familiar, like something your grandmother might have muttered in her sleep while forgetting who she was. And the tomb exhales. The backs on the walls begin to unfurl slowly, wetly, not from flesh but from memory, like dream animals rising from the mind of a dying god. One vertebral arc lifts, then another. And the basin begins to hum in that same low, almost unfelt tone you noticed when you first touched the door. I think we just answered a question that hasn't been asked yet, you say. Corvulus smiles. Good. Now we wait for the question to wake up. Something brushes your ankle. You do not look down, because you know somehow that the thing touching you has never known what a face is. It has only ever known names. And yours is not yet among the 7. The light has stopped pretending to be light. It shifts in waves like pressure from behind your eyes. The lantern Corvulus brought gave up minutes ago, its flame folded inward, turning into a little black spiral before vanishing. You're left with that peculiar glow, the kind that doesn't illuminate so much as identify. You see shapes, but only the ones that want to be seen. Everything else folds neatly out of sight. You whisper, "We should go," but the air responds first. It folds against your voice like parchment refusing to be written on. The way breath thickens before a storm, you take a step and the floor adjusts. Not cracks, not shifting tiles. Adjusts, like it was waiting for you to decide something and is now correcting you. Corvulus has crouched again. He's scribbling sigils with a fingertip onto the dust-covered stone eyes, unfocused. His mouth moves in a rhythmic stammer, as if echoing back someone else's words a few seconds late. You kneel beside him. What are you doing? He shrugs with a smile that doesn't make it to his cheeks. Teaching it names, that's the deal. It forgets the world, we remind it. One name per turn. You glance down. He's drawn 6 spirals. Yours is the 7th. That's not funny, you mutter. He doesn't answer because he's not Corvulus anymore, not fully. The person beside you remembers being Corvulus, but only the way stone remembers rivers. You stand. Somewhere above earth shifts. It doesn't sound like collapse. It sounds like something breathing in. Slow, measured, expectant. In the 1970s, a research team in southern Anatolia uncovered a tomb with no artifacts, no bones, and no entryway. Only 7 carved indentations on the floor. The site was dismissed as a natural geological oddity. But one junior archaeologist filed a private report suggesting the floor was an incomplete vertebrate schema, and that the chamber might be the inverse of a body, like a mold left behind after something left too slowly. She vanished 3 years later in Sardinia. The report was never published. You try to name things around you. It helps. Stone, basin, lantern, friend. Only the last one tastes wrong in your mouth. It sits oddly in the air, as if the air itself is unfamiliar with companionship. You step back towards the basin, which now resembles less a bowl and more a sinkhole for thought. Memories flicker across it, not yours, but rehearsals of memories. A woman in a red shawl lighting a candle shaped like a vertebra. A child drawing spirals on the inside of a tent with charcoal and a stolen tooth. A faceless figure holding a bowl carved from something that screams when sand hits it. They are not your memories, but the basin lets you remember them. You stare transfixed. Here's where the joke should go. Something like, well, at least it's not playing your middle school dance footage. Or could be worse, could be memories of tax season. But the joke stays lodged in your throat because you see something next. 7 figures, not human, not beast. Shapes like folded limbs and unfinished spines. They move in tandem, not choreographed but practiced. Like names being spoken with different accents. They walk in a circle, always closing in, never arriving. And in the center, a stone bed empty but not unoccupied. Corvulus's voice returns. But it's wrong now. Hollowed. Not echoing, but pre-echoing. She didn't forget, she was forgotten. That's different. Who, you ask? The one the tomb remembers. The name that buried itself. You ask why. He looks up. Because she learned how to change names mid-breath, and that's not allowed. You stare at him. He nods toward the basin. You look again, and this time you see not a reflection, not a memory, but her. Not a woman, not a god, not an ancestor. Something between those categories. Something that once held categories in her mouth and chewed them into vowels. She sees you, and the tomb flinches. All 7 sigils ignite, not in flame but in refusal. The air shakes like laughter that doesn't know what it's laughing at. Some researchers still argue whether prehistoric humans had a word for soul. There's evidence that some early Indo-European roots translated more closely to shadow or echo. Something that follows you but isn't always with you. One theory, unpopular even among fringe scholars, suggests that some early burial practices were not to entomb the body but to trap the echo before it could learn how to speak on its own. You feel her voice before you hear it. It fills the basin and spills across your feet. No sound, just shape. 7 syllables, none of them human. You recognize one. Your name almost. But not yours, not yet. Corvulus grins and whispers, "She remembers you. That's rare." Why? He shrugs. Most people don't survive being remembered. You step backward. A spiral opens in the floor behind you. Not carved, just available. Like a staircase asking a question. The tomb does not block your exit, but it asks, will you stay? Will you learn your real name? Or will you go back above knowing something has just learned how to dream you into being? Your foot hovers. Above the earth holds its breath again. You make your choice. You do not descend. Not yet. Your foot rests just above the spiral's edge, hovering like a forgotten thought. The staircase doesn't insist. It waits, the way an unopened letter waits. No urgency, only possibility. But the air has changed again, this time filled with a hum so low you feel it behind your eyes, as if the tomb has started remembering you in return. Behind you, Corvulus is humming again. Only this time it's the tune you heard in your sleep last week, the one you couldn't hum back when you woke up. His eyes are closed, but he sees. His hands are folded over his chest in a shape not quite human, not quite bird. A gesture worn away by centuries of misuse. You kneel beside him not out of fear, but because your legs suddenly remember how old your bones are. Older than they should be. You blink, and for a moment the tomb is not stone. It is a nursery. Small, warm, wrapped in pelts that don't belong to any known animal. A place where names are whispered into breath and breath becomes flesh. And for a moment longer you feel something touch your forehead in blessing or measurement. Then you're back. The tomb's solid again. But the spiral is still open, still asking. Long ago, in what is now northeastern Iran, archaeologists uncovered 7 funerary masks made of compressed ash and resin. Each mask was carved with a spiral on the tongue, and each was buried face down alone. No other artifacts, no graves, just the masks. The site was dismissed as ritual detritus, though one scholar working independently claimed they were anti-masks designed not to represent a person but to prevent one from returning. His paper was rejected for lack of evidence and unnecessary poetry. But you wonder if that's all this is. Unnecessary poetry. Except that poetry is the only thing that doesn't crumble in here. You speak, not loudly, not clearly, but with intent. Who was she? The tomb doesn't answer. The air doesn't tremble, but something shifts. Corvulus opens his eyes. They are not his eyes. They are a storm reflected in water. She had 7 names, but none of them were hers. They were given to her by those who couldn't bear silence. You say nothing. Corvulus continues. They called her the first echo. They said she was born when the earth tried to speak its own name but failed, so she carried that failure like a womb. She birthed languages that forgot themselves. That sounds metaphorical, you whisper. He shrugs. So does everything until it starts eating. You laugh softly. Okay, fine. But what happens if I go down the spiral? He smiles. Then you become something someone else dreams about centuries from now. Maybe someone kneeling in a tomb asking the same questions. Maybe someone hearing your name when they shouldn't. You look down the spiral. It isn't stairs anymore. It's memory folded and stacked, layered like a fossil pressed too many times. You take one step. It doesn't feel like movement. It feels like subtraction. A name peels off you quietly with relief. You take another. This time you hear laughter, not cruel, not mocking, just amused. Like a grandmother who warned you not to open the cupboard and now watches you wrestle with what's inside. Then silence. Then something else. Far below or maybe very near, a voice speaks a syllable that vibrates the air into a new shape. Not a name, but the absence of one. A sound that invites forgetting. Corvulus doesn't follow. He simply says, when you get there, don't answer the first question, no matter how familiar it sounds. You nod. But the spiral does not end. It folds. The way sleep folds. The way grief folds. Into itself, around itself. Until you're standing in a place that is not a place. There is no floor, no sky. Just the illusion of standing held in place by the memory of balance. And there she is. The one whose tomb you entered. The one with 7 names. She is not a person. She is a weathered hush. A braided stillness. But her eyes are kind, not safe. Kind, and that is somehow worse. She asks you a question. It is not in words, but you know what she's asking. You say nothing. Because Corvulus was right, the first question is a trick. She tilts her head. The silence thickens, turns warm, then cold again. Like a tide unsure of its own direction. She leans forward and with a single gesture she returns something to you. A fragment. A syllable. A root of your name before you learn to pronounce it wrong. You inhale and the tomb around you sighs in response. Far above, the obelisks lean inward. Far below, the spiral begins to loosen. You've been marked, not as prey, not as prophet, but as a rehearsal. And rehearsals always lead to performance. Whatever she is, echo mother tomb dreamer, she remembers now. And so will you. You climb or rise or unfold upward again. Corvulus greets you not with words, but a nod that acknowledges everything and says nothing. You are changed, but not yet finished. Above you, the 7th sigil burns in your reflection. Waiting. Corvulus is already gone when you reach the surface. Or rather, he's still there. Just not in the usual way. His pack remains against the shattered pillar. The notebook half-open spiral sketches curling toward the margins. But the footprints lead in no direction. They spiral out from where he last stood, thinning with each step, as if his body gradually turned into suggestion. You call his name once. It echoes back with a different vowel. The air has changed above the tomb. No wind, no bird song. Even the vineyard nearby has gone still, as though the leaves have forgotten how to rustle. You feel watched but not hunted. More like measured by something older than judgment. You try to speak and your voice arrives a moment after your lips move. Something is still carrying it, weighing it. In a nearby olive tree, a branch bends despite the stillness. Just one. The same one that brushed your shoulder when you arrived earlier tonight. You hadn't noticed it then. Now it seems to bend in greeting or farewell. The tomb behind you is closed. No sound, no seams. Only that same impossible stone smooth where no tools ever passed. You check the basin, it's no longer visible. Only soil scrub and dust. As if it had never opened. As if it never had to. A distant sheep bell rings. You turn toward it with relief and freeze. 7 white stones have been arranged in the dirt near your gear. Small, clean, rounded by time. They form a crescent, a gesture, not a warning, more like a reminder of what you aren't sure, but you pocket the smallest one. A keepsake you tell yourself. Later you'll convince yourself it was already there. Or perhaps Corvallis left it. But you'll keep it in your drawer, wrapped in linen, next to that strange recording you'll never play again. The one that hums softly even when unplugged. Weeks pass. You find yourself tracing spirals in your sleep. Waking with a song in your throat you don't remember learning. At night, the same question echoes at the edge of your dreams, but always in a voice you can't place. Do you remember who you were before you were named? Your answer is always the same. No. And yet, you've started forgetting other things. Small things. How to spell your middle name. The shape of your 3rd grade classroom. The face of the person who first told you what a tomb was. Gone. Or loosened. Like clothes left too long on a washing line. Somewhere deep beneath vineyard soil and Roman ruin, a spiral still turns, very slowly, almost imperceptibly. But it turns. It turns when names are spoken wrong. It turns when something half-remembered scratches the underside of silence. And it turns each time someone comes close to asking the right question. Because the tomb never needed to be opened. It only needed to be remembered. And now, it is. You walk past mirrors without looking in them. Not out of fear, but out of politeness. Because you've learned that not all reflections are yours to claim. Some belong to people who were buried with too many names and no one left to remember the difference. You don't speak in dreams anymore, you listen. And the voice that hums from beneath the soil does not ask for worship, only rehearsal. Somewhere beneath your ribs, a 7th spiral has begun to form not of bone, but of silence folded into shape. You forget things now with precision. And when someone calls your name, you answer carefully, wondering which version of you they're calling for. Wondering, too, which version might answer next.